So for the chocolate, let me go ahead and close those off. We are going to go ahead and hit Shift A. We're going to get a Musgrave texture. So Musgrave. And let's Control Shift left click it right there. And let's hit Control T, add a mapping and texture coordinate. Move this over. What I want to do with this now is I want to make it like thin lines of chocolate. So first thing we're going to do that is the X scale right here. You can see that as we bring this down, it starts to stretch it out. So let's put this to a 0.1 so it looks like lines going that way. Next, I want to increase the scale of this a little bit. So I'm going to put it to like 10 right there so we have more of them. And finally, I want to distort these a little bit or have the ability to distort them. So we're going to do the same thing we did for the butter. We're going to hit Shift A, add a color, mix color right here. Let's go ahead and drop this in. And then let's go ahead and hit Shift A, add a noise texture right here. Plug the vector to the vector and the color to B. So once again, factor of 0, it's the original vectors right here with no distortion. Factor of 1, it's going to distort it with the noise texture. Let's also change this to linear light so that it doesn't shift it off. And now you can see we could distort the chocolate more or less depending on how we want. Now I want this to be very subtle, so I'm just going to bring this up a little bit. And right here on the scale, we could change this so that it has finer or larger distortion depending on how you want. I'm just going to put this to 10. Again, depends how you want your chocolate to look. Next, we need to make the chocolate material. So once again, over here, we're just going to hit Shift A, add a principled BSDF. Let's put that right there. And yes, you guessed it, you could go to Google, get hex codes for chocolate. I'm going to put in 552 BOO, B-O-O, B00, for crying out loud. There we go. So again, the hex code is 552B00 right there. I was thinking boo like Halloween. And the roughness, by the way, let's Control Shift left click this so we can see what it looks like. Depending on how shiny you want your chocolate to be, it could be like melted chocolate, which will be a little shinier. I'm going to put this to like a 0.1 or so. So 0.1 something right there. And there we go. So now we got some shiny chocolate. Very cool. Now for this, once again, we need to mix this mix shader that we have here, which is the waffle and the butter, with the chocolate. So to do that, we're just going to select our mix shader, Shift D, duplicate it, and we're going to plug this top shader, the other mix shader, into the top socket, and the chocolate right here into the bottom. So now if we Control Shift left click it, once again, factor of 1 is 100% this shader, which is the chocolate. Factor of 0 is the waffle and the butter right here. So if we take this black and white that we made right here with the Musgrave, you can see we have that right there. The white parts are going to be the chocolate and the black parts are going to be the waffle and the butter, because again, these are values of 0 and 1. So let's take the height and plug this into the factor right here and Control Shift left click it. Now, right now, the chocolate is not really showing up, and that is because right here on our Musgrave, you can see that we have these values. However, they are not stark black and white values. It's kind of like transitioning. We got like kind of grayish areas. So we're going to hit Shift A, add a color ramp in between here. And with this color ramp, we can now go ahead, and if we bring the white slider down, you can see we could contrast the white and the black areas. So we're going to bring the white slider down and bring the black slider up a little bit if you want, like that. Then let's take this new color ramp and plug this into the factor, Control Shift left click it, and there we go. You can see what that's going to give us 5 hours later. You can see that now we have the chocolate on there. And we could go back to our color ramp and kind of contrast these even more. So you can see that right here, the white part is the chocolate. So we could bring this down to increase the amount of chocolate right there. So let's just bring it to something like that for now. Again, we're going to tweak all this here in a second because right now everything looks kind of flat and bland. But don't worry, we are going to continue this and add some displacement and bumps, and it's going to look really, really awesome in the end. All right, so now the next step, you can see that our waffle is completely flat. Now that's not really gonna fill us up, so let's go into edit mode, E key to extrude, and bring it down to something like that. And now you can see we have another issue, is that we have the butter and the chocolate on the bottom or underneath, and we have the chocolate on the side. Now we only want these on the top and not the side or the bottom. So to remove this, we need to create a mask where it's going to remove it on the sides and bottom. For that, we're going to hit Shift A, add another separate XYZ, and Control T, add a mapping texture coordinate, and plug the vector to the vector. Let's Control Shift left click to the Z axis right here, or the Z channel. And we're going to change this to generated right there. So now we can see what it's doing. It's separating out the Z channel right here, where here on the bottom we have 0, and here on the top we have 1. Now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and contrast this so that we also have black on the sides. We want to only have white on the top. You guessed it, Shift A, add a color ramp right here, drop that in and bring the black slider up right here. And we could even change this from linear to constant, which will basically give it a sharp fall off, and then bring the white slider down. So now we have this right here. Let's go ahead and bring it to here. We have a mask where we have black on the sides and bottom and white on the top. So now we're going to use this as a mask. Let's go over here. And once again, we're going to take this mix shader, Shift D, duplicate it. Let's go ahead and drop this one into the top right here, which is going to be the white areas. And in this one, we need just the waffle with no butter and no chocolate. So if we go over here, we can see that this right here is just the waffle. So we're going to go ahead and take this one from this principled BSDF and plug that into the top shader. So once again, if we Control Shift left click this, you can see that here, value of 0 is just the waffle. Value of 1 right here is going to be the waffle with the butter and the chocolate. So let's take this mask that we made, and if we plug this, again, we have white right here, which is going to be the waffle, the butter, and the chocolate, and black, which is going to be just the waffle. So let's take the color and plug that into the factor here, Control Shift left click, and you can see what we get there. We get the waffle on the bottom and the sides, and the top will be, once again, the waffle, chocolate, and butter. Very cool. Next, we want to go ahead and create a mask for the displacement of this. So let's hit Shift A, search for a displacement node, and we're going to plug the displacement into the displacement of the material output. Now for the displacement, you need to make sure to be in EV. So we're going to change this from cycles to EV. So let's change it to cycles. We could turn on experimental here if we want to use the adaptive subdivision. So turn on experimental. And right here in the modifiers, we need more vertices for it to be able to displace. Again, displacement is it's basically going to take the actual mesh and actually displace it based on the height information of the black and white values. So here we're going to add a subdivision surface. We're going to change it to simple. Once again, you could use adaptive subdivision, which will basically subdivide it depending on how close or far you are. It will subdivide it more or less. So if you want to use that, go ahead. I'm just going to leave it off for now. And I'm going to increase this to like 5 or 6. Then we're going to go to our material. And we need to make sure to change in the settings, change it from bump only to displacement and bump. And now you can see what's happening. It is displacing it like that. Now, obviously, this is not what we want. We want to go ahead and put in a mask or an image or different values into the height here to dictate where it should be high and where it should be low. Now here, for example, if we just take our bump right here, or not the bump, but the color ramp before the bump, which is our waffle, you can see if I plug the color into the height right here, and then Control Shift left click the mix shader, it's now taking these black and white values and displacing them. Now the black parts are going to be displaced down and the white up. Now right here it looks inverted, but if we put the scale to 0.1 to minimize that a little bit, you can see that here still the white parts are going down and the black parts are going up. but it should be the other way around. And that's because our normals are flipped wrong. So let's hit tab to go into edit mode, A to select everything, Alt N, and select recalculate outside. And you will see that that will fix the issue. Now the parts that are black are going to be indented, and the parts that are white are going to be erased. So you can see what we got right there. However, we need to also displace the butter and the chocolate, not just the waffle. Otherwise, it looks like, it looks ridiculous. So we want to displace the butter and the chocolate. For that, we need to create a mask that's going to combine the waffle right here, the butter right here, and the chocolate right here. So we basically need to combine all of these. And again, we're going to want the chocolate to be white, the butter to be white, and the parts around here of the waffle to be white, because all of those are going to be pushing upwards and raised, and the rest we want it to be black, as it's going to be pushed downwards and not raised. All right, so now let's go ahead and make it so that we have the butter displaced, the chocolate, and the waffle. First thing we're going to do is go to our color ramp for our waffle right here, and we're going to combine it with our color ramp for our butter. Now you can see that we have one issue with the butter. Once again, the parts that are white are going to be displaced up, and the parts that are black are going to be displaced down. Now obviously we want the butter to go up above the waffle, so we need it to be a white color. All we have to do is select the drop down on the color ramp and select flip color ramp, and that will invert it. However, now we have another issue. If we Control Shift left click our mix shader, the last one, you can see that now our waffle is the color of the butter and the butter is the color of the waffle, because we've inverted these colors. So we need to go to the mix shader where the butter is plugged into for the factor, which is this one right here. And you can see we have the butter plugged into here and the waffle plugged into there. We just need to go ahead and flip these. So take this and flip it. That way, once again, the butter is right here and the waffle is right there. All right, very cool. Now we need to combine this color ramp with this one so that we could have both of them be displacing. Let's hit Shift A, add a math node right here. We're going to plug the butter into the top and the waffle into here. So now if I Control Shift left click this, you can see that's what we get right there. And let's go ahead and plug this math node into the displacement height right there, and Control Shift left click the mix shader. So now we have that right there, which is not really what we want, sort of. We're going in the right direction. However, right now it's adding both of these colors on top of one another. So we have the butter right here, which is a certain value, and then we have this one going on top of it. So it's adding this one to this one. So you can see where they intersect. It's basically getting higher or being more raised where the waffle intersects with the butter, which again is not really what we want. Now what's happening here is that we're getting values above 1, because again, it's taking this right here, which is already a value of 1, and then adding this, because we're adding this on top of it. So now we're getting values higher than 1. So what we could do to fix this is if we go over here, we have this option clamp. And this will clamp it between values of 0 and 1, so it won't go any higher. So you can see if we select this right there, it clamps it, and now it's just at a value of 1. So that is one way we could do it. However, I don't want to go about that way because I want to be able to raise the butter higher off the waffle than it is right now. So let's say I want the butter to be higher. You can see right now it's in line with the waffle lines, which is not really what we want once again. So we want it to be higher than the waffle lines. So this clamp value could work if you want it level with it, but that's not what I want, so I'm going to unselect that. And once again, we don't want these weird waffle lines there. So we're going to use another option. Now before we do, I'm going to go ahead and show you quickly what it does. You don't have to do this. This is just to show you visually what this option on the math node does. I'm going to add a plane right here, and just quickly, I'm going to show you what's happening. Again, you don't have to do this. I'm just going to add a separate XYZ. You can do this if you want. Control T, mapping texture coordinate. Change this to generated right there. Control Shift left click. And I'm going to hit Shift A, add a map range. Drop that in. I'm going to change this to stepped linear and put the steps to 10. So basically, right now, it's going from a value of 0 right here to 1 right here. So we got 0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, all the way to 1. Now let me also add a displacement here. Again, this will show you visually exactly what's going to happen. Let me add a displacement, plug that there, and the materials, change this to displacement and bump, and plug this map range into the height. Again, you don't have to do this. There we go. And let me also add a subdivision surface modifier here so that it looks more like steps. I'm going to increase this to 6 right there. So there we go, and change it to simple. So right now it's displacing it based on the different values. You can see that value of 0 right here is being displaced downwards. Again, the origin of the plane is right here. And a value of 1 right here is being displaced upwards. So what's going to happen with this function that we're going to use on the math node? Again, let me write here. Let me go to this angle right about here. So right here, let me go ahead and go to about this angle. So right here, we have 0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6 right here, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, and 1. So we have 0 to 1. Now if I hit Shift A, get the math node, and let's drop this in between right here. So in between the displacement and the map range. The option we're going to use is we're going to change it to maximum right there for our waffle. Now the maximum is going to output the largest of the two input values right here. So our first input is 0 to 1 and the in-between values. And our second input right here is just this number right here, so 0.5. So again, when it's set to maximum, it's going to output the largest of these two values. So right here, you can see we have this set to 0.5. And so it's going to output the values that are larger than 0.5. So you can see here it's outputting 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, and 1. If I bring this down, you can see that now it's outputting 0.5 as well. And I could bring this down to 0, and now it's outputting everything. So again, this is going to, with the math node set to maximum, it's going to output the largest of these two input values. If I put this to 0.9, the largest of these two input values is the 1 right here, because 1 is 0.1 larger than 0.9, so it's going to output the 1. If I change this to 0.6, it's going to output the larger of these two, which is 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, and 1. So again, the math node set to maximum, it's going to output the largest of the two values we put in here. So once again, you put it to 0.1, it will output everything larger than 0.1. And then if I put this down, you can see that it's now outputting 0.1. So with this, let's go back. I'm just going to leave this here for now. And let's go back to our waffle. So right here, let's zoom in to the butter right here. You can see that we have, again, these two values being added together. So we're going to change this from add to maximum right here. And now it's going to take only the maximum value and it's going to output the largest of these two values that are here. So with this math node set to maximum, it's now going to output the two of the largest values that we have plugged in here. So if we take a look at this and hit Control Alt Numpad 0, let's take a look at this quickly. I'm going to grab the camera, G, middle mouse button, zoom it out just a little bit. And here I'm going to go ahead and select first the butter mask. So let's Control Shift left click to get the butter. And I'm also going to go to the render properties down here under color management. Let's change this from filmic to standard quickly, just so that we could see the values more correctly. And we're also going to go to the time limit here for the denoise. And let's put this to 10 seconds. That way it denoises after 10 seconds. And let's click render, render image. So here you can see on the butter, if I hit T to bring up these tools, you can see here we have a color picker or a sampler. And if I left click and drag, we get different options here, such as the position, but also we get down here, you can see HSV for hue saturation value on the bottom right there. So if I hover over this and left click and drag, you can see that the value right here is a value of 1. So this butter right here is a value of 1. Now if I go to slot 2 over here, and let's go back to our waffle right here, Control Shift left click that color ramp, and let's render this out. Again, this whole butter right here is a value of 1 basically. So right there. And this right here, if we go to our sampler again, left click and drag, you can see right here is 0, obviously. It's black, it's 0. Right here it goes from 0 and it starts to gradually go up. You can see on the value down here again. So 0 to like 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, etc. all the way to close to 1 right here. And then it drops back off to 0. So all of these values, let's say it goes from 0 right here to right here, it's just under a value of 1. So let's just put 0.9 just so that we know it's under 1. And then right here, it gradually goes back down. We have 0 right here. Here we have again like 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, all the way to close to 1, and then 0. So once again, the maximum on the math node is going to output the largest of the two values. So obviously our butter right here, which comprises of this whole square, is larger than any of the values that are here. Because again, we have 0 here for the black, here we have point values and close to 1, but they're all under the value of 1. So it's going to output this value of 1 over here and over all the other values, as that is the largest input value. All right, let me go ahead and erase that. And then we're going to go back. Let's change this back to filmic. So let's go back here under the color management, change this back from standard to filmic as it looks nicer when you render. And there we go. So that's what's happening. Let's Control Shift left click the maximum math node. And you can see that's exactly what we get. Where the butter is, it's taking that value of 1 instead of all the other in between values, as that is the biggest one. All right, I think I explained that enough. Let's move on. We got to combine the chocolate now. So we have the chocolate right here. The chocolate, we need to also have that be a bump or a displacement. So for that, let's go ahead and select this math node right here, the maximum. Shift-D, duplicate it. Let's plug this original one into here. And we're going to take our chocolate right here. So the color ramp of the chocolate, plug it into there, and Control Shift left click that. Let's go ahead and plug this into the displacement to see how that looks. Right here into the height. And you can see if I Control Shift left click this, it looks okay. However, the chocolate right here is way too high. As you can see, the chocolate is raised up quite a bit, which is not what we want. We want the chocolate to be lower. So to do that, it's quite simple. We need to go ahead and put the value for the chocolate down. Now, we could do that on this color ramp. However, I don't want to because this color ramp is used for the mask. So you can see if we take the white here and bring the value down, you can see the value here. If we just scroll down, it will bring it down. You can see it brings the chocolate down, but it also removes the mask for the chocolate. So now we have no more chocolate. So we are going to, let me hit Control Z. We're going to add another color ramp just for this node right here and not for the one that's plugging into the factor right here to dictate where the chocolate is. So with this color ramp selected, let's hit Shift-D, duplicate it, and drop it right after in between the maximum math node and the other color ramp. And now we could dictate the displacement of it with this color ramp. Now right here, it's going to output the largest of these two values. So let's bring the value for the chocolate down because right here it's way too high up. So I'm going to take the white right here and scroll down to bring the value down. And you can see what that gives us. Now right here it's still a little bit strange, and that's because we need to contrast this a little bit better. So let's bring this over here, and you can see what that's doing right there. If I bring it all the way, you can see that now it's just the chocolate that's raised, whereas if I bring it here, we also get kind of the waffle that's raised as well. Let me bring this back to a white color so you could see. So you can see right there and right here, if I start to bring this down, we get mainly only the chocolate, not the waffle also. So let's bring this closer to the right side, and then let's bring it down depending on how high or low we want the chocolate. So maybe right there, and we can also bring this black slider up to contrast it even more so that we mainly only have the chocolate and not the waffle that's raised. So again, you can play around with this if you want. You could also make the black color a little bit more of a gray color so that there's a little bit more of a fall off. Again, a lot of these options, you could tweak it and fine tune it to look exactly how you want. I'm just going to leave it like this for now. So right there. Again, you can see if I bring it to white, you can see what that does, which is not really what we want. So let's bring it down like that. It inverts it the other way, so the displacement is the wrong way. So something like that. And you can see the effect that we're getting now. Now, one thing is that right here, when it's going over this right here, two things. First of all, this is way too sharp. It's like a cone or a pyramid. Second of all, they're a little bit too high. So let's go to the color ramp right here of these. So Control Shift left click, you can see that's the color ramp here. So here, all we have to do, if I left click and drag this stop right here, you can see if I bring it closer to the black stop, we get more of that white color here in the middle. So now if I Control Shift left click this mix shader, you can see that here in the middle, there's a little bit more of a flat surface on it. And you can see if I bring this over, now it's flatter. However, it's still way too high. So I'm going to take this same stop and bring it down, because right now the value is 1, so it's very high. If we bring it down, obviously if we bring it to 0, it's going to go ahead and go flat, as you can see there. And if we bring it up, you can see it's going to raise it or lower it depending on how much of the value you put. So obviously before the value was set to 1, which is way too high, I'm going to scroll it down and put it to a value like that. So something like a 0.5 right there. All right, very cool. Let's also right click shade smooth this, and here we're gonna need to add some more subdivision surface as it's a little bit blocky. But check that out. Check out what we have so far. How awesome is that? Super cool. Another thing I want to do is be able to make the butter even higher if I want to, because once again, I want options. So here, very quickly, all we need to do for that is if we go to the butter, which is over here. So this right here is the butter. If we go over here, let me just Control Shift left click the last mix shader again. If we go over here, and before it goes into the maximum math node right here, we can hit Shift A, search for a map range right here, and drop that in. Now with this map range, we could remove clamp right there, and the 2 max value, we could increase this, and you can see it will increase the butter, which obviously that is way too much, but if I want to, we could increase it a little bit. And the reason being is because now, instead of it being a value of 1, right here, remember when we tested the values? With this map range, I could increase the value of what this will be. So if I put it to 2, now it will be a value of 2. If I put it to 3, it will be a value of 3. And obviously with this, since it's taking the highest value, it's going to take this value of 3. Now obviously this is way too high for the butter, but let's go ahead and put it to 2. 2 is even too high. Also, you can see that here we get some black spots on the butter. And that's because of this color ramp here. You can move this black slider away from the white slider or stop, and you can see that it will remove it. So let's just go ahead and do that. It will also give it a nicer, smoother transition and look more like it's melting. So there we go. Again, just bring this out a little bit like that. Now, obviously, a value of 2 is way too much. It was originally at 1. Let's put it to 1.3. Make it a little bit higher so that it's above the waffle edges. Control-Shift left click the mix shader right there. All right, very cool. So that is starting to look really, really nice.